And hello, everybody. Good evening. It's Saturday night here in Ohio, and James was already in the chat room earlier. So, hello, James. I don't know how long you're going to stick around because I remember you said that you work on Sunday mornings. So, if you got to dip out, that's okay. You can always come back and rewatch the show at your own leisure on YouTube or on the Facebook group, This Uncanny Earth Official. Now, I feel a sneeze coming on. I'm trying to fight it. If I'm making funny faces, that's me fighting a sneeze. What is this we're doing here? Of course, this is the Saturday Spiritualist. It's where we dig into different spiritualism ideas, different spiritualities, religions, etc., that aren't part of the big three, which would be, of course, Christianity, um, Islam, and Judaism. I guess you could do a big four because Buddhism's kind of in there too. It's pretty huge. But I think we're going to get into some Buddhism sometime in the near future. I think it's worth a look. Sorry, I'm juggling my camera around. The floor is a little uneven under this chair here. There's a carpet there. Um, but yes, it is the Saturday Spiritualist, and today we're getting into an interesting topic, and it's one that I've thought about a lot over the years. Because I'm not. Well, let's start first. Let's because I don't want to get too deep right off the bat and just I'll get away from myself. Um, we're talking about substance abuse and spiritual awakening. And that isn't to say that all substance used for spiritual awakening can be classified as abuse. I want to clear that up first. I'm not going to say that if you decide to do any of the things that I talk about in this video, it's not necessarily a substance abuse. If you're being careful, if you know your limits, if you know what you're doing, I'm for people being responsible for themselves and doing whatever they want as long as they're not causing harm to somebody else and knocking somebody else off of their own path. You guys know that. So, and generally, I have a pretty open mind about most things that we would call substances. I'm not really against marijuana use. I think eventually it's going to be legal across the United States for recreational use anyway. It's not a big deal. I have done it in the past. Not really a big fan, so I'm not a regular. Every once in a while I've done it, but I'm not really the biggest fan. I'm more of a drinker, for better or for worse. Um, and most of these things like that, LSD, I don't really have a problem with as long as people are careful with it because that can be kind of dangerous. Mushrooms, whatever. Um, I get a little bit angsty when it comes to things like heroin and methamphetamines because those kind of things tend to just destroy people's lives, and there's really no positives to stuff like that. Whereas the other things, if used safely, can generally be okay. You have mostly the opportunity to still survive and continue on. But but that's not here nor there. We're trying to talk about how use of different things applies to ritual behavior or just in general spiritual activities, such as prayers or vision quests or meditation or whatever. And the question I'm going to try to get at is how much is too much, not necessarily in a physical like quantifying a physical amount, but how much is it going to be more on the substance side and less on the spiritual side, if that makes sense to you. Now, there's been lots of cultures throughout the years. We talked about this actually on last night's episode of This Uncanny Earth. Towards the end of the episode, a little bit of a deviation. We got to talking about spirits, and how alcohol was called spirits for a reason. Like hard liquor was called spirits for a reason because it could get you into a different spiritual headspace and things. And it could cause. Sorry, I'm messing with the dog over here. She's antsy. She's old and she's a little bit silly. Um, but most ancient cultures had beers of some kind prevalent. like beer was prevalent. It was common for the Egyptians, for the Mesopotamians, for the Greeks. Although by the time the Greeks and the Romans came around, wine was starting to really take off. As I mean, wine had been around. It wasn't like it was suddenly invented, but it was taking off as the, this is what the people drink. The people drink wine, and they're happy and whatever. But around that time, you also got into a spiral of overindulgence, that perhaps we've never climbed out of. There's a little bit of philosophical nugget for you. Um, but beer was seen as it fortified you. It gave you some gusto. It was healthy. It helped you get through your day. It was extra carbs and things like that. And whereas wine and spirits were more, you'd have once in a while for actual medicinal purposes. We use that as a joke these days. Medicinal purposes. It's medicinal, officer. But back then, it generally was like shamans and doctors and people who worked with medicine throughout the years. They would prescribe, or they would give you a tonic or something, or a tincture, or something that generally was alcohol. A lot of times in the 20th, the 18th through 20th century, they ended up being things like brandy and whiskey, hard liquor, stuff like that, and just a shot, basically. Um, but back in older times, they really didn't get into that unless you were looking for a spiritual encounter or spiritual event of some kind. And even then, drunkenness was looked down upon. It wasn't something that you did willy nilly. Because they knew the power that these things had over the mind. They knew that your mind could be altered in different ways by the substances that you took into your body. And they were very specific about they handled that kind of thing. The Native Americans, of course, have had I don't know. I think there are some tribes that still, of the few that are still, relatively faithful to the heritage. I believe some of them still use peyote every so often, but it's not like an everyday. Like we don't like peace pipe every day peyote. It was a way for them to commune with the spirits that they believed were all around them, and it gave them different visions, and it altered their perception. But it was done under very specific circumstances. You didn't just roll up to your buddy's like domicile and be like, "Hey, let's do some peyote and talk to the gods and the spirits and whatnot." "Oh, you sure, bro? Let's do it." It was a very ceremonial thing. It was very specific because they understood the effects that it would have on a person. And while they believed that yes, it would get you in contact with the spirits, they also didn't want you to fall too deeply into that hole because the spirits might take you for one of their own. And that would be basically madness if you were driven insane or something like that. There, a lot of times, mental ailments were assumed to be the work of spirits or angry deities and things like that. And so they were wary of using these things past a certain point. There were people who studied for years upon years to be able to use the correct amount and the dosage and everything like that, and then to teach the next generation afterwards. That's why there was only one shaman or medicine man for every tribe or village or whatever, because not everybody could be trusted with the knowledge, and it couldn't become too commonplace. If it became too commonplace, then it would mess with society. Everybody's minds would be addled, and it would just it'd be too much. And we have a little bit of a resurgence in some of that stuff. Um, I often compare, in the world of podcasting and radio and things, I compare this Uncanny Earth more to shows like Joe Rogan, although less controversial and less, kind of out there, than to shows like Coast to Coast and stuff like that. Because we get into some different conversations and things like that, and we're like a different level of fun and whatnot, and we have cats clearly. Um, But I know Joe Rogan has talked about DMT, and I'm sure he's had plenty of experience on DMT. And it's a naturally occurring substance that's been around for as long as we know. And it's actually difficult, and it doesn't last very long for DMT to get to the brain, because if you just take it orally, it metabolizes and it doesn't have any effect. No hallucinations. You have to use it in a smoke, or you have to, or different ways to get it to the brain faster so that you can actually experience the effects. And for me, on a personal level, I'll tell you, I'm not a big fan of altered perceptions and altered realities. I don't like feeling like I'm not in control of myself, in control of what's going on in my mind. And maybe that's a character flaw. Maybe I need to, let part of that go and open myself up to something else in the universe. And maybe that would fix a lot of other things that's going on up here. But I disagree. I don't think so. Maybe that, again, maybe that's character flaw, arrogance, the ego. I don't think I need it. I think I can do well enough without it. But so I'm pretty wary of something like peyote or DMT or ayahuasca or the psilocybin. I think that's how you say it. Let me pull it up here. Um, psilocybin, I think. Yeah, the mushrooms, the magic mushrooms, quote unquote. Now, I've done different things in the past. I've had my different experiences with LSD and mushrooms in the past, and I got off relatively easy, I think. I didn't have some of the weird, like you always see in movies, or you hear from stories about, oh yeah, I saw this thing and all the stuff happened and the walls are bleeding and all whatever. I didn't have stuff like that. I felt weird. I didn't feel good, but I didn't have anything close to what I would consider a spiritual awakening. Maybe it was the dosage. Maybe I just didn't take enough, or maybe it was bad, or maybe I'm just averse physically to that kind of thing. Um, but the way I look at it is I look at it in the same way as the ancients did. I look at it more in that if you're going to do that, you have to know where the line is so that you don't mess yourself up too much. And that's one of the things I want to make sure that I impress upon you folks. If you decide to get into that kind of thing, or if you've done it in the past, I mean, no judgment. I'm not judging anybody here. Um, is that you should be careful. You should make sure that either if you don't know your limits yet, like if you're just going into it early on, you should find someone who is trustworthy, which may be more difficult than it seems, to help guide you to where those limits are and to help pull you out of it in case things don't go well. Because there's a point where, because of our brain is a physical thing, despite its potential connection to the metaphysical, there's a point where if you flood it with a substance, you can cause damage, physical damage, and that can potentially spoil or even um, change the way that whatever spiritual effects you're going through, to a point where you really can't trust them, where it's not really a spiritual awakening anymore. Instead, it's truly a hallucination. It's something that's not reality at all, and that you shouldn't trust. But you might not know any better because your brain's too much on whatever the substance is. Um, the few ritual things that I've done in the past, um, I start. I have two little teacups. They're very small. They're like maybe ounce and a half, 2 ounces. It's basically like a glorified shot cup, but they're shorter and they're rounder, so they fit about the same amount as a shot glass. Just the overall shape is different. And when I do my ritual things, I have one of those with a strong alcohol, um, but only one, because the intent is not to get drunk or not to get so buzzed that you're just like, oh, I'm having a great time. the intent is to help the mind kind of calm down a little bit. And I think that's what most of the stuff really is all about. It's to kind of take all those anxieties and all those things that you're overthinking, all those different all the stuff that your brain is going through on a regular basis, and put it on hold for a minute so you can focus on what you're doing, the task at hand. And I don't mean focus as in like hyper focused, like because alcohol obviously isn't going to do that, but it is going to calm you a little bit. And I know some people don't drink, and that's great too. I'm not saying that you should do what I do. I'm not saying this is what you should do because this is what works. I'm saying this is what I do. Everybody does things differently. And but I start with the little shot glass worth of strong alcohol, and I'll sip it at various times during the ritual thing. In the closing of the ritual, I usually have some strong black coffee because it's a stimulant. You relax your brain, and then once it's over, you bring your brain back out of it, if that makes sense. So I have an in and I have an out. Well, then anything else I do for the rest of the night, if I have some more to drink later in the night, it's not connected. It's all just, to hang out and just to chill for the evening. But and I've seen there's different left-hand path ideas that kind of go along that same route. Where a little bit of alcohol or a little bit of some substance to kind of get into the right headspace is good. But as far as going so far in that you're not able to tell reality from what it is anymore, that's when things can get a little dangerous and you need somebody to help. Always have somebody nearby to be a safe person who isn't indulging. They can't take any of it. Okay, if you're doing a group ritual, you can have 4, 5, 6, whatever, all these people, doing what you're doing, but there has to be at least one person on the outside looking in, being a spotter, like at the gym, checking to make sure you don't got too much weight, making sure nobody gets hurt, designated driver kind of thing. Always be safe with your ritual activity. Because it is easy to go from using a substance for spiritual activity and then become abuse. It's easy to do that because you start feeling good. You start like seeing things and you start thinking, yeah, I'm really connected with everything. I'm really I'm onto something here. I want to take some more to make sure I can keep this feeling going. But the more you rely on it to get to that spiritual level, the more it is going to take over and the more you're going to need that to do what you're doing. And then it doesn't become a tool or an assistance. It becomes the focus. And then you're not having a spiritual awakening anymore. Then whatever you're seeing is something else. And the ancients and the older societies, all the way back, Native Americans and back in prehistoric, they understood. They understood these things. And it's interesting because it's another reason why early Christian mass, like Catholic mass and stuff, when they do the communion, it would always be wine because everybody would have the wine. It would relax the mind a little bit, so you're able to take in all the different religious iconography and everything that's going on around you. You're more relaxed. Of course, they didn't go around giving you huge goblets of wine and be like, hey, everybody just get drunk and then we'll see God. Yeah, I mean, they didn't do that, and they don't do that today. And in fact, many modern Protestant churches use grape juice. All the churches I grew up in when I was a kid used grape juice. Probably because, part of it's the law. You can't give alcohol to children, in the United States, which is understandable. And then part of it also is because they don't want drunk people pouring out of the church every Sunday. It's different times. got automobiles and things like that. People didn't just walk home and whatnot. So, um, but yeah, I think different things can be very helpful. I think under the right training and assistance, things like peyote or the DMT, even like LSD and psilocybin can be helpful in the right dosage. And I'm not talking about microdosing because microdosing apparently just gets you in a mood rather than gets you into the actual hallucinatory headspace that you want to be in. You have to have a strong enough dose. And that's another tough area. You want to make sure you have a strong enough dose to get into the spiritual area, but you don't want to have so much that you're overdosing and you're causing bodily problems and your heart's having palpitations and things like that. Because that can happen. Um, Now, an interesting article that I read, I skimmed it. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I pulled it up today um, to go along with the show here. And I'm going to show it to you guys off my phone here. I can't do screen share on my tablet very effectively. I don't have that skill like Rob does. But this is from Psychology Today, and it's an article from 2012. So it's a little dated, but I think it still makes sense. And the headline is, of course, the spirituality of psychedelic drug users, followed by the tagline, psychedelic drug users may be more spiritual than other people. Because, as we know, psychedelics go hand in hand with spiritual experiences because of how they make us feel. Um, According to this, at the time in 2012, quote, recent research has found that administering psychedelic drugs in a supportive setting, remember, have somebody available, can provide profound mystical experiences. For example, a recent study, recent as of 2012, found that about 60% of volunteers in an experiment on the effects of psilocybin, who had never before used psychedelic drugs, had a complete mystical experience characterized by experiences such as unity with all things, transcendence of time and space, a sense of insight into the ultimate nature of reality, and feelings of ineffability, awe, and profound positive emotions such as joy, peace, and love. So, and it's a relatively good article for being, from 2012. So if you want to look it up, again, that was Psychology Today. And here's the article, Dan. You can screenshot it and do whatever you need to do. I'm sure you can find it. Um, and part of me, and the article goes into a little bit, part of me wonders how much of that is because it's actually connecting us to something greater than ourselves, or how much of it is an evolution from the substances and our genetic makeup. You know what I mean? Like certain plants create poisons in response to their environment, in response to predation and things like that. And over many hundreds of thousands of years, they become more poisonous or more thorny or taste bad or do different things in response so that they can continue to survive. Whereas different insects and different animals that eat plants will evolve ways to still eat them, like taste buds that are different or nervous systems that aren't affected or, that kind of thing. And so I have to wonder what the relationship is between some of this stuff and modern human physiology. I'd I'd be super interested in knowing how this would affect someone who was of a different hominid species, like Neanderthal or Cro-Magnon or something. I mean, there's no way we can find out. Of course, those days are long past, way before our time having this conversation. But I wonder, I wonder if the effects would have been the same, or if maybe they would have been afraid. Maybe they would have taken the things, and instead of a positive experience, they would have had terror or seen monsters constantly. I don't know. Or maybe not. Maybe it's exactly like the way it was. Or maybe that's how we first saw things when we first started using these things. But over time, a relationship developed between humans and the plants to be a little bit more harmonious. I don't know. It's hard to say. I'm not a biologist. I'm not a botanist. I don't know the answers to those questions. I can only guess and conjecture and then throw it out there and see what happens. But basically, to wrap everything on, the point that I'm making is because I'm here to provide you folks with the tools and ideas and the opportunity for your own particular growth. This is basically a cautionary statement. This whole video here. It's that if you are going to get into this kind of stuff, which I'm not against, I think if it helps, good for you. Okay? But if you're going to get into it, do so under the guidance of someone who knows, someone who's trustworthy, which is harder and harder to find these days, I know. And someone who will be able to pull you out in case things go too far over the edge. Okay? Always be safe with what you're doing. That's with any sort of ritual or spiritual activity. If you're going to do anything like that, be safe, be careful. But if it helps you to become a better person, again, not at the expense of anyone else, then that's great. I'm 100% for that. Okay. And that's about it. That's all I got. I just wanted to, I thought this was an important topic. It wasn't a long topic, but I think it was important to get out there because we hadn't really discussed it too hard on this channel just yet. And it's a big tool that people do use. People do use psychedelics for spiritual things on a pretty regular basis, and it's becoming more and more commonplace. And I felt it was appropriate to address that in this space. So that's it. That's all I got for you tonight. That was the Saturday Spiritualist for tonight. Tomorrow is Sunday. Nothing going on then. Monday, it'll be the second to the last episode of the Let's Talk About This podcast's first season. It'll be Monday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be having the link posted around different places, and we'll be talking about sports. I'll have my buddy Rob on from This Uncanny Earth. The two of us will be talking about sports because he's a sports guy, and I'm not a sports guy. And as much as I'm dreading it, I'm going to ask him to talk about the Olympics because he's a huge Olympics guy. He loves the Olympics. Like, I can't even tell you how much he loves the Olympics. Like, me just saying that won't prepare you for how into the Olympics he is. So we're gonna do that on Monday, Twitch Tuesday after that, Nothing on Wednesday, Uncanny Spirits Club on Thursday, and another episode of This Uncanny Earth on Friday. Okay. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions, comments, etc., by all means, put them on this video on YouTube or in the official This Uncanny Earth official Facebook group on Facebook. And if you're looking to support the channels in any way, there's the Uncanny Earth Patreon account. There is also my own PayPal if you feel like tossing a couple bucks just for upkeep. You know, I'm not hurting for money. I'm never going to beg. I'm not going to say, please help support me. I can't get by without your donations. I don't need that. That's if you feel like it, if you want. No pressure ever. PayPal.me/spider in the hall. Easy. Other than that, that's all I have for you, and I appreciate you guys tuning in. It was good to see James in the chat room. I don't know how long he was able to stick around, but hopefully you got to see some of it either now or maybe you're watching this tomorrow or the next day. Either way, hope you enjoy. And I will catch you guys next time. As always, be well.